Hello everyone, Diabetes II here. Today I'll be talking about the Dragon Warrior Randomizer 2025 Winter League. In this series of videos, the goal is to introduce each flag set for this upcoming event and discuss some of the approaches and strategies an experienced DWR player like myself might take. First, a brief overview of the league. Live racing will begin with 5 weeks of regular season matchups. Players will race in groups of 4 with points assigned depending on finish order, 5 points going to the winner. Group assignments during weeks 1, 2, and 4 are random, while assignments during weeks 3 and 5 will be positional depending on current standings entering those weeks. From there, the top 16 players qualify for playoff elimination rounds, with seeding determined by regular season point totals. Players will continue racing in groups of 4, with the top 2 finishers in each race advancing to the next round. 4 finals participants will face off in a 2-race series, with the fastest aggregate time determining the winner. Players of all skill levels are welcome to join. It is worth noting that all races are held with no prior knowledge of the seed, rotating flag sets for each week are non-standard compared to those usually raced, and various informational resources are available for all players in the DWR Discord. That is to say, newcomers and veterans alike may be facing new and unexpected challenges with less of an experience gap between them as in other formats. If participation as a player is not in the cards, we always have volunteer opportunities available to facilitate our live race broadcasts. Whether as a restreamer, race tracker, or commentator, we greatly appreciate the time and effort dedicated by our volunteers to make these shows happen. No experience is necessary, and we would be happy to get you up to speed should you offer your time. Participant signups are now open and will remain so until Friday, January 31st, 2025 at noon Eastern. A formal reveal of the participant field will be broadcast on Sunday, February 2nd, time to be determined. Regular season racing will begin immediately, with the Final Four to be concluded by the end of March. League launch and update shows, as well as most races, will be broadcast live at twitch.tv/DWRandomizer, and all relevant documents, participant resources, full race calendar, and standings are available via the DWR Discord community. Relevant links in the description below. Let's take a look at the Week 3 flags. So Week 3 is titled Neapolitan-ish, a play on words given our tradition to include a set each year that leans heavily into vanilla, non-randomized options. This is the flag set, and a highlighted list of differences from standard flags. The overworld map and positioning of locations is not randomized, nor is the equipment available in shops. Enemy zone composition and abilities are also unchanged. The hero will learn spells in order and at the prescribed levels as in vanilla, but chest and search contents will be shuffled. Permanent Repel is active, as is the Threes Company alternate win condition. Speed hacks and easy Charlock are enabled, and the very fast 50% leveling curve will be employed. Some flag combination interactions to note include non-random enemy zones with the non-random map. So though locations will be in predictable spots on the map, which destinations are in which spots exactly is shuffled. As a result, Zone 0 will be assigned to the zone Tanthagel Castle is in, with Zones 1 and 2 to the west, east, and north-south respectively. All other non-Charlock zones will be shuffled across the overworld, while caves and dungeons will house vanilla enemy sets. Spike tiles will also not be randomized, so expect an Axe Knight in Hawksness, Green Dragon in Swamp, and Golem in Charlock. Also, the Threes Company alternate win condition without open Charlock. In order to make seeking coordinates possible without forcing a manual count if the player wishes to take Gwaelin to the Dragon Lord for the alternate win, therefore not being able to take her to the King to get the GPS, the required quest items cannot be shuffled onto the overworld search tile. That said, other potentially useful items, like the sword, armor, death necklace, and fairy flute, may still randomize to this spot. Since we're dealing with so many vanilla game features this week, it may be beneficial to reference maps and data from online walkthroughs. A map like this highlights zone boundaries and enemy zone compositions, though of course the arrangement of zones will be shuffled as previously noted. Knowing how to find, or avoid, certain groups of enemies can be clutch in some situations. Similar maps may also help predict coordinate locations relative to the various starting positions. A list of shop offerings may also be helpful in recalling which equipment upgrades are available in which towns. But perhaps most critical in light of Permanent Repel is a list of enemy agility values, with Repel always active enemies with agility equal to or lower than the hero's defense will no longer appear. So knowing which enemies are still in play, or whether a certain equipment upgrade will leave a desired target available to fight, can greatly impact decision-making. As noted earlier, I will discuss my thought process in approaching each flag set and note strategic decision-making as I go. Of course, your mileage may vary, as not all seeds are created equally. Everyone's strategic preferences and risk tolerances may be different, and my ideas may simply not represent the most optimal strategies. Okay, let's get into the playthrough. As usual, I'll be providing post-game commentary and analysis as I ran through this seed a couple of weeks ago. I do remember at least the primary story beats, although not all the specific details. We'll talk about strategic decision-making, how to approach these non-standard flags, call out good and bad decisions and choices along the way. We'll see how things play out. Normally, I'm content to let things just start in the throne room, but I will take a moment to mention name choice and stat build for this week. Normally, Strength HP tends to be by far the most common choice for runners, but that's also in light of those two stats being critical for Dragon Lord readiness at the end of the game. In this case, Permanent Repel throws a wrench into that, and if we're not planning to fight the Dragon Lord, maybe a different stat build would be preferred. I went ahead with Strength HP in this one, but there's certainly a discussion to be had about whether or not another stat build would be more appropriate. We'll kind of get into some of the details of that as we play. Anyway, this is our Neapolitan-ish week. We will be dealing with a lot of vanilla-style things. Not the chests in the throne room, however. So we find gold and key. That's a pretty great start. 16 strength is nice. We have 6 defense. Vanilla spells, so no need to check the spell list there. We'll learn heal at 3, hurt at 4, and so on. This is also the first week in the league where keys are required. So it's actually kind of nice here that we picked up gold and an extra key. We can leverage that extra key to open this door here, give us access to the key vendor, and fill up unkeys. So that's pretty nice. We also did the pirouette in the throne room. That allows us to increment the chest counter from 3 to 6, and that will allow the 3rd and 4th chests picked up in the Tantalus Treasury to be grindable. And we've been able to do that the first couple of weeks because of no keys required. Here we did have to have the extra key. But still. Silver Harp, that's quest item number 1. Fairy Water, that's a pretty nice pickup here. Is that another Fairy Water? No. It's an herb, so we'll fill up on that. Those two probably would have been the best options so far to grind. Fairy Water for damage dealing, herbs for healing. Help get us off the ground. Final chest, it's not gold. It's Erdrick's Token, quest item number 2 already in the books. Looks like I'm opting not to reset here, so definitely worth considering. Getting off the ground in this permanent repel set can be a bit difficult. If you start off with a decent bit of agility, you may be repelling some of those earliest encounters, your slimes, red slimes, potentially Drakey's ghosts, etc. If you don't have the attack power to fight anything beyond that, it might be a little dicey. So having access to torches and fairy water is pretty important. Castle basement has the gentleman wanting the harp to turn in for the staff, so right away, we're pretty good to go on quest items. We see that we're also dealing with the vanilla map this week. Now the locations of the key places are shuffled, so locations will be at the spot that something normally is, but which thing is at which spot is shuffled around. So we are at the Jerk Cave spot here in the southeast corner on the second continent. There's only 2 other locations here. One of them does have to be the Swamp Cave. So at best, we're going to have 1 cave or town to work with here. Very fast leveling curve as well, so only 3 XP needed for level 2. I think one reason to not reset in this case is 16 strength is pretty good, and 6 defense is not so much that we'd be repelling things like the, well, in this case, red slime Drakey Ghost. We've gotten rid of the slime, but not the red slime. Walked a little too far north into the zone just to the north of the bounded zones and found a knight. So vanilla enemy zone complements as well here. So again, with those shuffled locations, as we talked about in the introduction, Zone 0 will still be around Tanthagil Castle. Zone 1 will be to the east and west, in this case just to the west since we're in the southeast corner. And Zone 2 will be to the north and south. In vanilla, so it's pretty important to have a full list of those zones if you're not familiar with them. Zone 0 has just slime and red slime. Zone 1 adds the Drakey, and then Zone 2 adds the Ghost. So Ghost here, pretty important. 22, 22, 3, 6, and 7 MP with the spell of Heal at level 3. That is pretty good. That is pretty good. So I don't think we're going to have any difficulty getting off the ground in this one. Level 4 is also really important to reach. Now we have the spell of Hurt. Even if we didn't have good attack power, even if we didn't find torches, fairy water, etc., now we have a damage-dealing spell to work with. Opting to push the exploration a little bit here, we have a cave at the rim spot. If I had to bet, it's probably going to be Swamp Cave, but it may not be. We also have the Swamp South spot further north in the continent. It is Swamp South. So choosing whether or not to grind or whether to explore is definitely something that has to be considered in this seed and in this type of flag set. So with that permanent repel, you're really kind of fighting against it. Any defensive upgrades may start repelling those enemies when enemy agility is equal to or less than enemy defense. Sorry, hero defense. That's when those enemies will disappear from the encounter pool. The grave up here at the Swamp South spot, nothing too critical there in the treasure chest. See a town across the way. Worth keeping in mind. Now, since we're dealing with vanilla zones, and therefore the zone boundaries with the vanilla map as well, we can really kind of strategically walk around the map here and figure out, okay, even based on a single enemy, maybe 2 enemies in an encounter area, we can figure out which zone we're dealing with, whether or not that's a zone that we want to avoid, and we can really tiptoe right around the perimeter of those as much as we can, if it's a zone that we don't want to be in, or vice versa. Make sure it's a zone we do pass through if it's a more favorable spot. It's like a pretty decent set here with the Wolf Lord and the Spectre. This is the bottom of the grave zone. With the Hurt spell, this is pretty clutch. Not necessarily the best physical location for it to be. Pick up level 5. The closest location where a town could be here is at the Hawksness spot. We're gonna have to traverse at least one more zone of enemies to get there. And it's not a friendly zone. Nicely walking around the edges of that zone, but jumping back into it, I need to go one step further south to get out of this Star Wyvern Green Dragon, presumably the zone that's around Cantlin and in Hawksness. It's also going to have your wizards and such in it, so really not where you want to be. If I go one tile further south, I would be in a different zone and at least have a chance of it not being as dangerous. Green Dragon sends me back to start, so that is definitely a mistake. Also, arguably a mistake, while that's the closest location to check, there's only one location there, and then all the way in the Cantlin spot. So, from Mountain Cave, it's probably more beneficial to try to go north. It's a little bit further to get to locations, but not only do you have 7 total in that direction, you've got a cluster of 4, all relatively equidistant between the Garenham spot, the Tablet Cave spot, and then the Tanthagil and Brecconary duo. Now we've walked through the mountain cave here twice, also the top of the grave. While the zones are shuffled on the overworld across any of the non-Sharlock zones, the caves will all have their vanilla complements, so exactly what you'd expect to be in Mountain Cave is exactly what's there. Same top of Swamp Cave, because those share a zone. Top grave and bottom mountain will share a zone, and that will be vanilla as well. So will Hawksness, so will Bottom Grave, so will Sharlock Castle. Not the friendliest sets of enemies here as we're traversing north toward the Garenham spot. It is a town. Is it vanilla? It is not. It is Hawksness. Another town. This one will be a healing spot. It's Brecconary. We have vanilla shops, so we do have the cash to pick up a copper sword, which is a nice offensive upgrade here. The extra 10 attack power is certainly going to help us, save MP since we don't have a ton to work with. Also, just hacking and slashing through enemies is faster than menuing through spells anyway. And there is a zone boundary here. I'm hugging right against the edge of it. The town and the vertical column of tiles to the east of that is one zone. This zone is just off here to the east, and it appears to be that same zone that we encountered earlier. We've got the Wolf Lord, although that could be part of the zone south of Rim, but it's not. This is the bottom grave zone. There's a couple of annoying, but also a couple of decent and helpful abilities here across the enemies. Druid Lord has Hurt, but also has Heal, which is a bit on the annoying side. Spectre with Hurt and Sleep as well. But on the other hand, the Wolf Lord and the Droll Magi both have Stop Spell. If I could do physical attacks, it doesn't really matter. They're just wasting their turn. As long as I keep myself healed up and don't need to heal in battle. Plus, I can always use herbs if I need to. The scary enemy is the Wraith Knight. The Wraith Knight has heal, so it's going to be pretty tough to take down, but more importantly, it's by far the strongest enemy here. And since we're really minimizing the amount of defensive equipment that we're picking up, in order to not repel enemies and get ourselves stuck or have a really hard time punching above our weight class, if you will, they're going to do a lot of damage. Easily can two-shot us from full hit points here at level 7. We'll have to be very careful about those encounters. Speaking of which, Ambush, 23 damage down to 2, and alas, would not have mattered had we healed up. We still would have been two-shot from full hit points. It's the risk you run. It's a great, great zone, though. We did see a slightly less scary, but also less lucrative zone up here to the northwest, kind of what I just passed through. We saw the Poltergeist, we saw the Dracula, probably the bottom of Mountain Cave zone, / top of Grave zone. Although with the extra agility we picked up, we might be repelling some of those enemies. Makes it a little bit less favorable. Also, I think all of it, or at least most of it, is not on high encounter rate tiles. Technically, another way to get access to those same good enemies that we saw around Brecconary is to go back into the grave and dig down for those last 2 chests. Or we could just sit around in the hills here right outside of Swamp Cave. So we're gonna have to traverse some nasty zones here in order to get back where we were. I like the idea of being near the town because it gives us the ability to just kind of hit the eject button, go right into town, heal up, and whatnot, potentially leverage our gold, although it's only Brecconary, and with vanilla shops, the best thing that we can get, we already have gotten with the Copper Sword. But if I'm worried about traversing this area, which just keeps getting better, we could at least pop into that zone south of the swamp exit and just hang out there for a little bit. Well, Demon Knight says no. Unfortunately, there's not really a whole lot of zone boundary dodging we can do on this walk. We're pretty much walking right through the middle of those zones. Kind of linear pathing here, both to get from Tanthagil to the rim spot for Swamp Cave, and also from Swamp Cave at the Mountain Cave spot up to where Brecconary is. There's just not a lot of deviation one can make. We could go west around this little mountains area, and slightly easier zone initially, but it looks like the zone northwest of it is the same zone, so we're not really getting ourselves any benefit by doing that. This time the Rogue Scorpion is the one that says no. The ambushes are still pretty unfortunate here. It really gives us only one opportunity to run. Not sure what the exact agility is right now, but it certainly is not high enough for I'm 90+% to run from things. So definitely risky to go through here. It's still a fairly low level. But we've seen a really, really good place to grind, and it's kind of hard to not tunnel vision into wanting to get right back there. I think it did see Wolflord and Wyvern up to the northeast. That might actually be another good zone. It's unfortunately contaminated with the Goldman, which, I mean, cash might be nice to buy some decent equipment, at least a little bit later on. We don't have access to a gold grind in the castle, as we've already seen. But Wraith, Wolflord, Wyvern, Goldman, it's not terrible. We also do have the utility spell here. We have Sleep. Generally, you want to use that when it makes sense to use it. I think in this case, the resistance to sleep from those mid-game to slightly late-game enemies is high enough that my odds to run away successfully is actually higher than my odds to put it to sleep. So it makes sense to just try to run. If, on the other hand, I were like level 3 and encountered a werewolf, I should well, I wouldn't have sleep in this case, but 28 more strength at level 8. We are a glass cannon and a half here. Lots of attack power, not much at all in the way of survivability. Low defense with no equipment, low hit points. And that's where kind of hunkering down into a grind, I think, really comes in handy. Again, think about what could I be doing differently, or what could make this situation better? It's the question I feel like I ask myself almost constantly when playing DWR, and that's always the thing that kind of guides my decision-making in Seeds, is what could I be doing differently that would be better than what I'm currently doing? Or how could this be more efficient? And in this case, outside of randomly falling on top of Erdrick's Sword, I'm not really sure what would be better. I think that this zone is about as good as it's gonna get. I'm right next to a town for easy healing. I'm safe, generally speaking, here. I'm not worried about dying and losing map position, as long as I get back to this spot. Obviously, it took me a few tries to get back here, picking up level 9. I'm not gonna suddenly learn Heal More or Hurt More with the vanilla spell order. I can't really afford any upgrades, although now with having killed a few things, I now have enough for a hand axe if I choose. Like, what would really make this better? And the answer is, I don't really think there is much of anything that would. So I'm certainly content to hang out here for a little while, continuing to gain levels, continuing to gain more hit points, more agility, more strength. Try to get myself into a position where, even if I start running into those green dragons and star wyverns and wizards and werewolves and knights and demon knights, that I'm not scared to be able to run from them, because I think I'm fairly likely, and maybe, just maybe, I can even fight a few of them. We have very high attack power. It's really now more about the survivability. Alright, level 10. The level is coming fast and furious now. Not much in the way of stat gains, although 8 HP is pretty nice. 17 MP and Stop Spell is really neither here nor there. Stop Spell in the vanilla enemy set is not the most useful spell. there's certain enemies that it can be kind of helpful on. Chances are by level 10, you probably don't need it to fight warlocks anymore because they have sleep. Probably don't need it against specters, at least in this case because of the decent attack power. They also have sleep. Magiwyverns, you could certainly consider using it against them because they have sleep as well, but sleep works quite well also against them. Star Wyverns have heal more. Although I don't think we're quite in a position where we would want to try to fight them. So soft spell with vanilla enemy abilities, not the best. I can tell you one place where it will come in handy, and that's with our friend to the west. So in addition to the zones being vanilla, all the spike tile enemies are also vanilla. So expect to see an Axe Knight in Hawk's Nest, the Green Dragon guarding the princess in the Swamp Cave, and the Golem on the map, right? No. Golem in Cantlin would not be fun if it was a Cantlin Tanthagel start. That would be horrible. In fact, the Golem is just where we'd expect it to be normally in DWR, which is down guarding the throne room of the Dragon Lord. But we will have to face it. Another level up there, 0633. Kind of stalling out a little bit on the stat growth here. HP is probably what I would like more than anything. Still worried about getting two-shot by a lot of enemies, but now is when I need to start thinking, do I want to sell out for some defensive equipment? I have enough cash now to buy, if I were to find, say, Garenham to get half plate and the full large shield if I choose. On the other hand, if I find Rim or Cantlin, I can get the broadsword. Speaking of Rim, what have we got? The herb. The 106 gold herb. I feel like I got ripped off. Going for the broadsword pickup. A lot of times in this, I won't go for the incremental upgrades. So a hand axe versus copper sword doesn't feel like it's going to be a big difference. The broadsword with 10 extra attack power feels more substantial, so I'll very often do that. Next door, another town is Cantlin. You might want to rethink that. Yes, I don't need to and can't afford any equipment upgrades, but there's the matter of some coordinates that would be nice to figure out. Another nice thing is there is no rule against having a vanilla map next to you when you play these. Just as it's nice to have the zone boundaries available to you, it's also nice to be able to quickly map out coordinates, as long as it's not being done automatically or pulled out from the RAM from the game. It's certainly legal to do that in live racing as well. 60 north, 8 west. Based on the fact that we started at the Rainbow Drop turn-in spot, that is likely to be second continent just to the west of the Swamp South spot where Grave was. So it'll be a good opportunity if we get to the point that we need to go back over there to dig out the bottom of the grave. We can pick up the coordinates at the same time. An interaction that we called out earlier is that in this flag set, because of the Threes Company alternate win condition, which, again, if you're not familiar with that, the alternate win condition, instead of defeating the Dragon Lord, we have the option to rescue the princess from the Swamp Cave, but instead of returning her to Tanthagel Castle, we take her to the Dragon Lord and agree to his proposal to rule the world. And the three of us, thus Threes Company, are gonna do exactly that. So because of that, if we can't return the princess to the castle to get the GPS, Gwaelin's Love, you'd be forcing the player to count coordinates out, potentially, for a required quest item. So the quest items, specifically the harp, token, and stones, can't be on the map. That said, other pretty important things, like the sword, armor, flute, and death necklace, can be. So one of those 4 items will be on the map, but it will not be the stones. And still a little bit risky fighting these strong enemies, again, mostly just because we don't have a ton in the way of hit points. With meager defense, a lot of them can still two-shot us, especially if we get ambushed, we could be in trouble. Alright, the town that was on the other side of the water that we saw earlier is the town of Cole. Search tile here is empty. No joy in Cole. Can't afford and probably wouldn't want a full plate upgrade here. The only town left at this point is the town of Garenham. We've got the northeast spot here, which is not Garenham. It is in fact the Rainbow Drop Turn-In. So we have Garenham and then Stones Cave, Tablet Cave, and Mountain Cave left. The town will have to be at one of those. One cave will be behind, and then the other 2 caves will be in the other 2 spots. The Hawksnest spot and the Cantlin spot, very much in the opposite direction from where we are. Well, it will be Garenham, so at least 3 treasure chests here looking for sword, armor, and stones. Also, the Fairy Flute, we alluded to it earlier, the Golem will be guarding the Dragon Lord's throne room. Assuming we are not going to try to defeat the Dragon Lord, chances are we're going to have stats that are good enough to get there at less than level 17, and level 17 is where we learn Heal More in vanilla. So if we don't have Heal More, how on earth are we going to take out the Golem? The Flute becomes a critical item. So if we can dig that out somewhere, all the better. Alright, Garenham, what have you got? Trolley NPCs blocking the way, that's what you got. Also a replacement key, gold, and fairy water. So again, no key items here. The only thing we strictly need is the stones. Sword would help a little bit in terms of the grind. Armor, again, double-edged sword here, which is ironic because it's armor, not a sword. Is that the walking regen, protection from breath attacks, and hurt more, and barrier tiles, and all that stuff is great, but 28 extra defense is going to start repelling a whole lot of enemies that we would still probably consider fighting. So when you find the armor can be kind of critical. Torch, gold, fighter's ring, it's 2 attack power, I guess. Death Necklace, probably the only item of the set that doesn't really have a use here. Primarily, since the Death Necklace gives 10 extra attack power at the cost of 25% of max HP, as we find wings in the final chest. I should pick these up, since I don't have Return yet and won't have it till level 13. It doesn't really serve a purpose, because we're not defeating the Dragon Lord. So do I really need the 10 extra attack power? And do I really want to give up 25% of my max hit points? Doesn't sound like a good trade-off in context. Which kind of leads us back into the discussion earlier about stat builds. And what stats do you really need to favor? And which ones not? I say that as I go back here. 2 things. 1, great heads-up play, keeping those wings to make sure that I could wing home. There's nothing else there on the eastern half of the map. The remaining locations, Tablet Cave and Stones Cave, are along the west and south. We have the coordinates and the bottom of the grave to dig out. We can do that easily from here. So good play there. On the other hand, I had 1,999 experience points. I needed 1 point to get level 12, which I just did, and learn outside. So I had to backtrack my way out of the mountain cave. Not ideal. Not the longest dungeon to do that in, but it's still something I should have just fought another battle outside before going in. To be fair, it was still only a 1 in 3 chance that the mountain cave was in the back of Garenham, but still. At least it will come in handy now that we're heading toward the grave, and chances are it makes sense to do it here. We're still looking for, again, the stones, but also sword and armor could be pretty nice. Alright, so again, I have definitely looked at the vanilla map already. I have mapped out and pinpointed exactly where those coordinates will be, 60 north, 8 west. So I can go right to the spot and search it. And it is indeed just a few steps west of Swamp South Spot, which is the grave. And it's the armor, so we might see a couple of the enemies here in the bottom zone, but 28 extra defense. It's going to start repelling a lot of things. So it's also potentially helpful, as we mentioned at the outset, to have a list of enemy agilities. That way you can sort of plan where exactly you want to maybe get some upgrades, or determine, well, should I walk around in this zone if, let's say, the wolf is the only thing I'm not repelling, but the warlock, skeleton, metal scorpion, they're all gone? Do I really want to walk around here? Curse belt in the curse belt chest, so no help there. So having that can be really helpful. Again, lots and lots of resources in the DWR Discord if you're not already there. The training room has a lot of things pinned, and even if not, there's a lot of other resources floating around as well. People are always also willing to answer questions, point you in the right direction. Alright, final chest is gold, so again, no dice. We got the armor, but we did not find the stones. The only other spot we have left, other than those 2 single treasure chests, is Hawksness, which would seem to be the most likely spot at this point, to find the stones at least. So we'll see what direction I head first. Looks like we're going south. Again, it's hard to say if it's a optimal or suboptimal play. I mean, if theoretically you're looking for 2 things and you really want the sword for some additional level grinding, and I don't know if I feel super confident about diving Charlotte Castle at 55 hit points. But yeah. But heading back into the discussion on stat builds, I guess it really comes down to what stats do you think are important to have in the end game for diving Charlotte with the princess, knowing you're not planning on fighting the Dragon Lord? And what stats, to a lesser degree, might be okay to penalize slightly at the very beginning of the game? We find wings in the Stones Cave. Tablet Cave will be at the Cantlin spot. Again, heads up here, picking up the wings. We still don't have return. Won't have it until we pick up the next level. So good idea to do that. And ultimately, the effect on stats is quite small. So the stat builds available to us are strength and hit points being favored, strength and agility being favored, hit points and magic points being favored, or MP and agility. And it's not a super significant amount. I mean, again, you could calculate exactly how much benefit you're going to get, but generally speaking, at a value of around 80, you're going to get like 5 extra or fewer points in a value. So if it's a favored stat at 80, if it were unfavored, it would be like 75. Which, when you really do the math on it, doesn't make a massive difference in a lot of the calculations. It's a couple extra % chance to run from an enemy if it's agility, as we find the fairy flute. You know what? It was worth the walk out here. It's not the stone, so it's not required, but it's ostensibly required to fight the golem. We will take that all day. And using those wings that we picked up. Probably faster to walk back here without any encounters and back through this swamp cave. So that's the story for agility. Again, HP, it's kind of nice. This is a low HP seed. Having a couple extra HP is probably better than not when we have some things that could two-shot us, potentially. So that's kind of important. MP, probably more important in the early game as opposed to the late game. We don't have heal more, and we don't need to save our resources to get through a Dragon Lord fight. We can just burn everything to the ground on the dive. And that leaves strength. Again, important, definitely in the early game to get off the ground, barring, you know, having access to torches and fairy water to get to level 4. And helpful in as much as grinding is required to get the levels, because we're never going to get hurt more. I mean, we can get it, but not to level 19. So which stats are really the ones that you want to favor? Arguably, strength HP is probably not the best build here. MP is probably not super duper necessary in the late game. You want to have enough, but you don't need 80, 90, 100. 40 is probably plenty. Agility would seem to stand to reason to be a decent thing to have. More successful run attempts from enemies. Maybe if you sell out and get all the defensive equipment before diving, you're going to repel an extra enemy or two in Sharlock as a result. Maybe. Hit points, I don't think you can argue that hit points aren't good to have. But strength, not so much. So, MP agility, maybe? Again, I've had a pretty lengthy discussion about this recently, and ultimately, the effect is so small that I don't think it's going to make a substantial difference, but it is something to at least entertain for a discussion. Alright, as we went back through the swamp cave there, you'll notice I fought the green dragon and picked up the princess. And I have no idea why I would do that now, other than I happen to be walking through. If I was just going to try to fight the green dragon and grind there, yeah, I could definitely see that. That would be a reasonable thing to do. A lot of times in these, you're looking for grind tiles to be the way that you get your level ups as needed. I don't think 55 hit points is great for diving through Sharlock, so I probably want at least another level or two to try to increase that hit point count, maybe get some more agility and such. But it doesn't really make sense to pick up the princess now. One, Swamp Cave is basically on the way from Tanthagil to Sharlock. So why go out of your way? You're not going out of your way to get her later. It's not like she's on the other side of the map. Two, I haven't fought the Axe Knight here yet, and even though I'm going to pick up level 13, meager stat gains, I'm going to have less or fewer hit points here than I would even if I were doing a vanilla speedrun, which already is super aggressive in fighting the Axe Knight with, I think, 63 hit points. We're going to have 58. To be fair, we're also going to have a lot more strength. So we're much more equipped from an offensive standpoint to win here. But it's got sleep. We have to waste a turn casting Stop Spell. If we don't, like, two-shot him, he gets the rolls, two-shot us. And that's just going to send me back to Tanthagil, and I have to save the princess again. We do get through, so it was very risky, but we did get through, and that's going to be our Stones of Sunlight, the last required quest item. That means that the sword is, in fact, in Sharlock, and not worth pursuing specifically. We don't need it. But again, I think picking the princess up when I did, absolutely a mistake. I think the better play here, and it looks like I might just be walking it back to continue to grind in this zone of werewolves, star wyverns, green dragons, and... is that this zone? This might be the Magic Wyvern zone. But I think the green dragon, as long as I can survive a couple of attacks or don't get ambushed, I think might be the better option here. Yeah, this is the Magic Wyvern zone. Like, these are dangerous fights with only 58 hit points. We're certainly not guaranteed to two-shot. We're really not even guaranteed to three-shot the werewolf and the star wyvern. Plus, if we get ambushed or dodged at some point, like, really put yourself into some danger there. What are we doing and where are we going? Aha! I know exactly what I'm doing here, and it is a heads-up play. So, if you were paying attention a bit earlier, when we got into Garenham, I picked up a key to go up to 2 keys, then used 1 key to dive through the grave, and another key to pick up the princess. So I am out of keys right now. So I'm going to head over to Rim here and buy a few keys just in case we die and lose the princess. We don't have to walk all the way back here, then go back, go through Swamp Cave again, get the princess, and do all that rigmarole. At least we have this as backup. But I also went ahead and picked up the large shield. We don't need to worry about our defensive stats at this stage in terms of repelling things. We're certainly capable of taking out spike tile enemies if we want to continue to grind, and we're not going to be repelling them even with the large shield. So good calls across the board here. It does look like I'm going to continue to grind on the overworld in this zone here. Again, I think the best option is probably the Green Dragon. You don't want to refight the Axe Knight simply because of that sleep spell. Really kind of forces your hand in terms of casting Stop Spell. And this is a great example. Like, again, we got lucky. Star Wyvern low rolled and didn't kill us. We didn't get dodged and were able to take it out. Really kind of living on the knife's edge here. Just got to figure out, based on my risk tolerance, at what level do I think I want to go? What is my idea of a safe dive? I don't think I'm going to pick up so much agility without the Silver Shield to be repelling things like maybe the Wizard, but very unlikely the Werewolf, Star Wyvern, and Green Dragon. So at what hit point threshold is really what it is that I think I'm going to have the opportunity to be successful. $58 doesn't feel very good. Red Dragon, unquestionably, can 2-shot from full hit points at this point. Armored Knight likely has a roll for it as well, though it's much less likely. Of course, Red Dragons, since we have vanilla abilities, they will be in the bottom zone of Sharlock, the bottom 3 floors. They have sleep. Also, Wizards and Armored Knights have hurt more, so at 58 hit points we can get 2-shot from those as well. Axe Knight will be in the wild in Sharlock as well as we sneak through again. Oh boy, we got lucky. Oh boy. He wasted his turn casting Heal More even though he was stop spelled, otherwise we were dead. But Axe Knights with sleep can also ruin your day, so there's a lot of potential pitfalls in Sharlock. Again, the vanilla zone's there as well. It's why we really haven't had to worry about certain enemies on the overworld, but we will unquestionably encounter them in Sharlock, because those zones are also vanilla. Okay, level 14. Again, the stats just really not doing it. The last thing I need is more MP. 7 hit points is okay. Now up around 65. Again, still could be 2-shot from full by a red. We might not be able to be 2-shot by an Armored Knight anymore. But still, dicey. Alright, we're making a break for it. We still need to do the Rainbow Drop turn-in. We'll see what my choice is after that. Do we go to the Green Dragon and grind? Do we go to the zone north of Start to grind? Do we just make a run for it? And I don't have the exact stats in front of me to know exactly where we are, in terms of agility, especially. No more wings. Probably don't need to go back into the castle here to refill the MP, as we kind of alluded to. You're not going to run out of MP in Sharlock. There's not enough enemies that are going to require use of utility spells. You still, at least in this case, I have walking regen with Erdrick's armor. If things go bad, we might use like 30 MP between run fails and maybe a rare cast of like Sleep Against a Stone Man or something. So probably didn't need to top off there, but that's okay. It's safe. And we are going to make a break for it, so 65 hit points going to have to sustain us through Sharlock. I'm trying to think if there were any other relevant topics to cover here. I think we pretty much talked about everything. Talked about stat builds and which stat preferences would be. We talked about the vanilla zones, how to identify and locate them, and some resources associated with them. Of course, the pitfalls with that as well. Permanent repel and the considerations about that. Keeping in mind that enemy agility table. Keeping a handle on your total defense stat, either through the equipment upgrades or your agility. And now here we have Pursuit of the Alternate Win Condition, taking the princess through Sharlock to the Dragonlord. Definitely a risky proposition, since we're doing this at a level at which we don't have heal more. Our hit points are not great, but again, we can burn every little bit of resources we have. I can use everything in my inventory, I can use all my herbs, I can cast all my spells. As long as I get to the Dragonlord with at least one hit point left, the rest doesn't matter. First risky spot there. And really always should be healing to full here. There's no reason not to. It's the safest thing to do. We have effectively infinite resources compared to what we will actually use. Alright, the scariest area, the bottom 3 floors, the U floor, the hold right floor, and the bottom floor. Stone Man, Armored Knight, Red Dragon, Wizard. We might be repelling the wizards. And no reason to pursue the sword. It's not going to help us really in any way. It would technically make the golem fight a little bit faster and easier, but we've got the flute. Shouldn't be an issue. It won't have any abilities. It can't dodge. There's the first red dragon. We mentioned it had sleep, but it also has weak fire breath, so we have that working in our favor a little bit here as well. One step away. Armored Knight. Not being friendly, that's a big hurt more. Oh, man. One step from the golem, and 10 more steps to the Dragonlord. We were 11 steps from victory. The Armored Knight said, no you don't. You're a little aggressive coming down here at this point. We're sending you back home. That said, that was a pretty admittedly fortuitous dive in the bottom floor of Sharlock. We really didn't encounter too many scary enemies at all, or too many encounters in the first place. But I think that proves pretty definitively here that this is perfectly fine for a go level. We just need to run successfully from the Armored Knights and Red Dragons. It may require a little bit of luck, but... And that's, again, that's the trade-off here. You know, is level 15 gonna give us enough to be safe? Or is it gonna be basically the same thing? Is it level 17 when we get heal more? You know, each dive does take several minutes. It's not like it's super free. If this were Short Charlock, it's a different story. If we come right to the bottom floor, it's not a big deal. But here... we've got some walking to do. This is not an insignificant amount of time to be set back. So having to do 2, 3, 4 plus dives in order to make this work, Green Dragon would be a pretty easy grind. And with the very fast leveling curve, those levels just kind of crank out pretty easily. So that is another of the last decision points that we've talked about. At what point are you ready? And again, depends on risk tolerances, depends on exactly what the stat build is. In this case, I think, again, we have decent enough odds to give this a shot. Alright, back into the fray. Axe Knight. Still probably the only real dangerous enemy on across the top several floors. Maybe the Blue Dragon, since it has a little bit more agility. But the Axe Knight's sleep is really what's a little bit dangerous about them. The rest is not that bad. Okay, top zone of Charlock gotten through, end up in the next zone. So it's the top 2 floors, the next 3 floors, and the final 3 floors. So this is the zone that's going to introduce the Blue Dragons and Stone Men. And Stone Men very susceptible to sleep. 7 in 8 chance to put them down, and then you guaranteed run success. So most of the time, I think I did it on the first dive through, always put them to sleep. I opt to just run there, but the correct play is really to put them to sleep. Again, MP is not something I'm worried about maintaining here. Alright, first Armored Knight successfully escaped from. And back to the bottom floor. First try run from the Red Dragon. Another Armored Knight. First try, you love to see it. 1 step, Red Dragons. Again, first try. This is where we got stuck earlier. Can we make the last few steps to the Golem encounter? We can. Great. Loot is a necessity here. Speed hacks speeding up that animation or little flute trill. Note using herbs here to heal. Healing spell is, I believe, 18 to 25 healing. Or HP restored, versus herbs 20 to 35, so better on average to use herbs. Don't want to be in a position where the golem gets us low, we min-roll our heal cast and then get sniped. Got the resources, you might as well use them. There it is. Alright, heal up. 10 steps to victory. There it is. And for the first time and only time, hold A. Do not hold B, otherwise you're going to fight the Dragon Lord. Instead of being declared a fool, we're talking about redecorating, sprucing this place up. Oh man. And there you have it. Three's Company alternate win condition successful. It did take 2 tries. We were able to get it done. Overall, I think a pretty solid performance here. Again, the most important things in this flag set are getting off the ground at the very beginning, whether that's with your attack power. Maybe you get some gold at the start and you're close enough to go look for a town to buy a weapon. Maybe you find some torches or fairy waters either in the throne room or the treasury if you have an extra key or something. Getting off the ground is pretty important, at least to get heal and hurt at levels 3 and 4 respectively. From there, most of the time you should be good to go. Keeping an eye on grind versus explore, and once you get heal you have a little bit of flexibility, and you need to branch out because in those opening zones you only have up to ghosts, which aren't super great to continue to grind on past like level 3 or 4. But kind of finding and identifying those zones, utilizing your zone maps, utilizing your zone composition lists and all that stuff, really important. And then just keeping an eye on your agility and your defensive upgrades. And the worst thing that can happen is probably an early accidental armor pickup, but you can always downgrade. As long as the armor is not in the throne room, you can get it again. So sell it, come back, get it later if you need it. And then determine your risk tolerance and going after the Dragon Lord. I think I made the right call as to when I went this time, but maybe your risk tolerance is a little higher and you wanted to go earlier, but maybe you wanted to play it a little bit safer and do it in one try. Anyway, as the vanilla credits wrap up here and we head into the credit crawl, or the stats crawl, that's going to do it for me. Hopefully this introduction and playthrough were helpful in highlighting some of the unique challenges of this flag set. Admittedly, anything vanilla-ish, or Neapolitan-ish in this case, is probably my favorite. But anyway, hopefully some of these strategies and resources as well are going to be helpful to you. I hope that you consider joining us in the 2025 Dragon Warrior Randomizer Winter League as a player, volunteer, or audience member. Relevant documentation about the league and a link to the DWR Discord are available in the description. If you enjoyed this content, please like and comment below. Also, feel free to join me live at twitch.tv/Divey2 for DWR Racing and other gameplay. Again, thanks for watching, have a good day, and we'll see you next time.